Okay, everybody should be receiving a message, a consent message.
Yep. Okay, well, welcome everybody. Today is our final session with you, which is exciting and sad all at the same time, but we are so excited that we had so many people come to our sessions, and that we've had so many new interested people with Writers Workshop, and people that have already been through Writers Workshop and have also been really contributing to the conversation with some really good questions. So we're going to talk today about how we can connect a little bit of this to our Alberta curriculum specifically, and what the celebrations of writing are going to look like.
Celebration. Oh, we should have had the soundtrack, ladies. We should have had the
celebrate good times. Come on, that.
Here we go. Good job. Good job, Lauren. Too bad I could not see anyone. Oh, I saw a few smile. I see Colleen who smiled. That's good. Okay, that's good. Thank you for turning on your camera. Juliana was not very impressed though. There's no smile on her face.
Oh my gosh. I can't see anybody's faces. Thankfully.
I'm kidding. Okay, so celebration. It is a super important part of the Writers Workshop process, and this is something that is worth spending time on, and the kids will be super excited about this. So we decided to post some pictures of one celebration that I was lucky to be part of, Windsong. I don't know if we have any teachers here from Windsong School, but what they had done, so you can see the picture in the middle, that's Nick Stabler, who was a grade 5 teacher and decided to do the units of study with his class, but he also decided to ask his grade 1 and grade 3 team to do it. So the 3 grades decided to do the narrative unit together at the same time, and it was pretty cool actually. Their students became buddy writers for each other, so the students were working together. They all use the same theme, Wolf, which actually Wolf is the mascot of their school, but each grade and each student took the story differently. The celebration was amazing because what Nick did, he contacted the book company and they actually published the actual book. So every kid left with a real book from their writing. So, and I should mention in Nick's class, well, actually in the 3 classes, they wrote a common story. So together, so they kind of diverted a bit. And like, this is not something I would recommend you as the first time doing the Writers Workshop to try, but this is something that they've done after many years using the process, but they created one common book per grade. Anyway, what I wanted to say is that the celebration was amazing. It was a big unveiling of the book. They had parents, grandparents, they had the media there, but it doesn't have to be that big. So maybe, Lauren, do you want to go to the next slide? The celebration can be as complex, as amazing as what we've showed with Nick, but it can also be super simple. Really, what we're celebrating is the progress that the kids did. It's the message. And I love this picture. So I saw that on Twitter, and I thought that was just fitting so perfectly the Writers Workshop philosophy or mindset, I guess, where it's all about the message. This is an example of one of Barack Obama's speech. You can see all the edit, all the crossing, all the modification that he's done, all the work that he's done. It's not nice, it's not pretty, but that's not the important is the process that went through it. And it is messy, but we're celebrating the end product, the process that the students went to with that final piece. Next slide, Lauren. So this is why we strongly recommend having, and I know the next 2 slides, we've shared them with you, but we thought that was important to share them again. You need to make sure to have that common space for published work. Strongly recommend having it outside in the hallway because you want other people to see it. I love the picture on the right where it shows the kids are putting the 2 on the main piece. This is where I started and this is where I am now. So people in the hallway can see the progress that each kid did. This is another way of celebrating, just putting the comments. So what we've seen in many schools, they put the piece of writing in the hallway, and then they leave a pack of Post-its. So they're asking other students in the school to do a gallery walk during one of their literacy period, where they all go and they read each other's story, leaving comments on Post-it. This is a way to celebrate. That's another example. What I love about the picture on the left is, as you can see, there's whiteout, there's correction made, but that's still the Post-it that's being, this is still the copy that's being posted to celebrate, because I think I've mentioned in the session, we don't want to spend hours asking kids to retype or to rewrite the story, especially thinking on some of our reluctant writers. They already use all that energy to come to that final piece. You don't want to force them again to spend a big amount of time to make it all pretty and perfect. We want to see this. This is what we're celebrating, the process.
And Julie, may I just also add, it's all about having an authentic audience, right?
Yes.
Like all of these things are having someone beyond just the teacher looking at their work, so that they can see that their writing, their ideas matter, and that they can be shared, and that they have a voice. And that's really what we're trying to do, is empower voice in our students.
And even though students love you guys, you're not the audience that they like. Yes, as a, like, it's not a strong enough motivation that, oh, I'm writing for my teacher. Yes, but we want to make this a bit broader. So I know during this COVID time, when I gave support to teachers who were creating writing assignment, make sure that the kids were not writing just for the teacher, because I can tell you from my son's experience, he could care less, because his comments like, I know Madame won't care much. And really, when I was looking at the feedback that the teacher was giving, was like, good job, Felix. Yeah, like that was not motivation, right? So we want to make sure that there's that authentic audience. So for example, during this time, what I was recommending, ask students to write letters to the nurse, to the firemen, to those essential workers, to their grandparents who are stuck at home. And this is when having that authentic audience, that's when students will become more mindful of the way they're writing, making sure that that message is clear. It's giving a purpose in their writing. So I know that, like, we're saying that the importance of Writers Workshop is the message, or students being able to share their message. And this is when we are tying it, that convention and spelling. If there's too much spelling mistakes, your audience will not be able to understand your message, right? So it's always referring back to that audience and the purpose. I think that's super important. So we put here on this slide, oh, go back, Lauren, sorry. On that slide, we just wanted to share a few ideas. Oh, and actually, let me talk about that picture. I've put the teeny URL of a video that I did. I was fortunate to be able to work with a class of grade 2 students at École Edwards. And Rick Gaudio was able to document the process. It was fantastic. So I've put the link there. It's on the Rocky View YouTube channel. The video has been done with a class of French immersion, but don't worry, there's all subtitles, so you'll be able to see it. And you'll see, this is one example of that celebration. So what the teacher, Sally, did is she had her students celebrating their writing by inviting their buddy readings. The grade 5 students came down, but she also had a few parents. And as you can see on that picture, all the other students had their Post-its that after each student read their story, they could leave feedback and comment. It was amazing. The energy, the buzz in that room was absolutely amazing. And I've listed a few ideas, like creating posters, put their work on display, bring their books to life by having some students making a play out of it, make an official invitation. I think when we're talking, like, it can be as simple or complex. As I said, it doesn't have to be like Nick having the real public, the book being published, but it's about you. How are you addressing them as, okay, writers? Like, you want to give them that feeling that, hey, I'm a writer too. I saw in Twitter on a post that someone had, all they did was just to get a red carpet in the class, and as students were going to read their story to their class, they had to walk the red carpet. Just small little things like this to make them special. So what we're going to ask you now, we know many of you guys have done writers workshop, and you may have done different kinds of celebration. We're just sharing a few ideas with you, but we always love learning from each other. So I'm going to put right now the link of the Jamboard in the chat box, and we're going to ask you to go and share any ideas, any celebration that you may have done with your class, or that you have heard of. But we also want to hear the trickies. Was there any tricky in that celebration part of the writer?
Nice.
Maybe Lauren, as we're waiting, you can sing that song again just to create some ambiance.
Celebrate good times. Come on. That one?
Yeah, that's good.
That's very brave of you.
Well, I've recently discovered karaoke and I'm absolutely horrific at it, but I don't even care.
Oh, I could see Colleen was dancing too. I think Colleen is burning to join you in the singing.
Oh my gosh.
Share with their buddy reading from another grade. Yes. I made a book of an awesome with my students, and I put it in the class library for students to read. Yes, yes, yes. That's what we did also, I think, with Sally's class. Excellent. Make the book, leave it in the learning commons of your school, so other students can take out, like what we had at Edwards. We had asked the library, the learning common facilitator to create like the code so the kids could take out the book through the COA system. It makes students feel like real writer, and I think that's what we want, to give them that feeling. Inviting administration to join to the listening. Yes. Gallery rock, writing on desk. Everybody moved around. Yes. Invited parents. Yes, that's awesome. We had an event this year called the Battle of the Books. Actually, this is the second year where you hosting this division-wise, but every year we bring an author, and it's amazing to hear students talking to those authors. And it was good this year. I was able to listen to a discussion from a student who had done the writers workshop and addressing the real author and just saying like, oh, I write books too. And it was amazing to hear that student who was so proud to share, and listening to them referring to themselves as writer. I think that was awesome. Meeting the deadline as a tricky. Yes, yes, yes. The suggestion that I've read that I thought was awesome was, when you start that unit, already set that date for that celebration. It's September, yeah. We're starting our writers unit, but you know what, guys? We will be done by October 20th. So right now, before we start our unit, we're going right now to create our invitation cards to invite our people to come and celebrate with us on October 20th. So that gives you as a teacher that deadline. And it's a good reminder that you don't need to cover all the lesson before it's time to celebrate.
Yep.
If you wait too long, kids are losing their motivation. They're tired of that piece of writing. So yes, meeting that deadline, set that celebration night right away from the beginning. Yes, kids not really buying it if their parents could not make it. Yes, that's always a tricky.
I wonder then what's a way around that? Like if they could record themselves on My Blueprint, and maybe if their parents couldn't make it or the buy-in wasn't there, if they could even record a video to send to the author that inspired them or something. Yes. That's a tricky, because yeah, so many parents are working during the day.
But then could the audience, to make it more equitable, could the audience not be just parent? It could be open to anyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I love like the celebration. What I love about that argumentative piece, asking where the ask is coming from the principal about the real issue she has. That's what we want to create, real authentic purpose for students to write, where they feel that yes, they need to share their ideas. Children to learn, be self-reflective in their growth. Yeah.
Mm.
Share
I think
approach,
that's something
reject.
that's going to be, yeah, like so Julie, just finding it tricky to guide younger children to be reflective in their growth. I think that's something that's going to be grown over time, and you know, it's worth putting the effort and the time in. And something like the checklist yesterday were a good tool to use, as if, you know, there's 2 areas you think that you did really well in your writing, to kind of give them some really specific guidelines and what they could be reflective on as well. Because I don't know, or yeah, it's good is a kind of a really common answer when we start out on this
Lauren,
workshop
just
model.
before we move on to the next slide, to our last topic, sometimes it's hard to type your idea, to share your ideas in a post-it. Just want to open the floor if anyone wants to turn on their mic and share orally with us any good.
Julie, one of the from the chat, Sherry wrote that she had students invite a special adult from within the school for families that couldn't attend. So that's a great alternative to that tricky.
So Sherry, I'm curious, who were those special adults? Were they aunt or who?
No, it was just whoever in the building. So for some of the kids, it was like a past teacher. For some of the kids, it was like a music teacher. Some asked admin. I think in one case, they invited the custodian. It's just somebody that they feel connected to in the building so that they have somebody that's theirs for them.
That's
Great
awesome.
idea.
Thank you, Sherry. Anyone else would like to share?
Okay, so we're going to get into assessment now. For those of you that were able to join us yesterday, we had talked a lot about some formative assessment pieces. And one of the pieces that we talked about was the on-demand, and I'm just going to quickly explain what that is, because we're going to use that term in case you weren't here. So the on-demand is a prompt that you give to students, and it tells them, the prompt explains what you want them to write. So it's genre-based, so say narrative, for example, it'll ask them to write, think about a moment in their lives, and then they're going to write about it. And then there's going to be specific criteria within that prompt that you are expecting the students to write about. They're given a block of time, and then they go ahead and write. And so at the end, you have a product from every student with the same prompt or the same criteria. Not necessarily the same topic, but all of the criteria has been given the same. So I want to just go back as well to the triangulation of data, talking about Ann Davies' work. So we talked a lot about how that final product for the celebration is one piece, but we can also use the on-demand as a product for a summative assessment piece. But we also need to be really cautious that our observations and our conversations and that whole process working towards the end piece, whether it be that on-demand or what it is really, really important, and that we're taking note of all of that. And then going forward, all those observations and conversations are also contributing towards that. Because if you think about it, if you're only using that one final on-demand product as your mark for that piece of writing to contribute towards that final report card mark, but the night before the students' parents were fighting, and then they woke up in the morning and realized that their dog was really sick, and then they got in a fight with their brother on the way to school, that student's level of writing for that on-demand for the day might not be necessarily reflective of their abilities and what they've learned over the time. So again, using that triangulation of data piece, and especially if right now you're in an RTR school, that's one thing that we've talked a lot to Nancy Lake about, because I'm a huge person that uses observation and conversation in my assessment. And so there's absolutely ways that you can use these and input these into PowerSchool as well. If you have questions on that, you can reach out to me or Nancy Lake later on. So we want to give you a couple of tools to use to support using our curriculum and working with the Writers Workshop. So for those of you that are in RTR schools, I'm sure that you know how to, that you have access to all the ICANN statements. And so essentially, if you're not an RTR school, because I know that there's a few out there still that haven't even been exposed to any of this work, what the ICANN statements are is we have our learning outcomes, and then within that we've created just the learning outcomes, the specific areas is written in an ICANN format. It's our curriculum written in an ICANN way. And then so one thing I'll show you, so Julie has given you the link for the real-time reporting. So then there's, I would assume that you would all know, but there is a entire folder with everything. So here are all the outcomes. So some guides and things in respects to that. And if you're not an RTR school, but you want the ICANN statements, absolutely go for it.
Lauren, do you want to just show what it looks like in one?
Mm-hmm.
And just if you go to the Rockview website, as long as you log in as the staff, and if you Google on the top real-time reporting, you will have, it will give you access to this.
Mm-hmm. So all of the outcomes are here at the top. So they've done it from K to 9. And then when you look at a specific grade, for example, then here are your geos, and then moving into your ICANN statements.
And all of those ICANN statements are based on the SLOs in the in the curriculum.
Yeah, the student learner outcomes.
Yeah.
Another really great resource that we are going to show you, Edmonton Public, I'm not sure if you're aware, does a lot of work, curriculum work, creating their own tools, creating their own assessment pieces. They're a huge, huge, huge school division. And so they do a lot of work, but it's also copyright protected. And if you do want to get your hands on some of these things, you have to pay for them. However, right now, everything's open up and free. So if you can take your time and go in and get some of these really great tools, I would, which is in the link, the little tiny URL here. But the one thing that we're going to talk specifically about today that Edmonton Public has created is what they have, what they call are the writing behaviors in ELA. And essentially what they've done is they've taken all of the learning outcomes for our program of studies and just pulled the ones that are writing specific. And so I'm just going to show you what this document, for example, looks like. So what it is so these are the general outcomes, and then these are the specific learner outcomes that are underneath the umbrella of the GEO. And so all of the ones that they've pulled, rather than going through all of our curriculum for ELA, they've pulled everything that's related to writing. And so this is an incredible tool. They've also done it for reading. And so what we said, there's tons of ways that you can do this, but what we're going to use today in terms of tools is we are going to use this tool because again, it's exactly verbatim this. There's nothing new coming out of this. It is our curriculum, full stop. And so the nice thing is that it's only writing. So that's a really, really great tool that they've come out with. And so absolutely check this out because you can see everything that they're offering for free right now.
And there's stuff in there that's not just ELA related. So like, it's a really wonderful resource to be able to tackle. And it, as Lauren said, it is free. So.
Okay, so that's our curriculum. Now, rubrics. So when would we use the rubric that's provided in Writer's Workshop? So we want to use that for summative assessment, and we're also going to use those for norming meetings. Right now, I'm going to talk specifically about how it connects with summative assessment. However, the thing that we want you to know is that the rubrics that are provided by Writer's Workshop, as you know, it's an American resource. So these are not necessarily, this is not right here in a nutshell, our curriculum. And so what we are going to do is we're going to show you how we can connect our curriculum to these rubrics, and then moving forward, how you can make sense of that. And so there's no hard and fast rules on how to do this. I'm going to show you one idea on how to connect the curriculum to the rubrics provided by the units of studies. But we're not here to tell you that this is the way to do it. This is the end all be all. And we're not here to say, you know, this is exactly what writing for grade 2 should look like. And we'll get into that a little bit more.
And
So
Lauren, just to add, that these rubrics are based on those learner progressions, that writing continuum that we had shared with you earlier.
Mhm.
And so really what they've done is they've taken those and they've chunked them into grade. And that is based on the core curriculum, but it's also based on the 30 years of practice, the research that goes behind that continuum piece as well. So sorry, I just wanted to throw
No,
that in.
absolutely. Thank you. So when we look at the unit of study rubrics and we looked at our Alberta curriculum, one way we are going to show you today that you can correlate the grade level rubric to our curriculum is, first of all, you're going to start with our program of studies. And what you're going to do is you're going to identify what outcomes will marry nicely with the genre you're teaching. Because some of the outcomes are going to look really good in terms of information-based writing. Some are going to look really good in terms of narrative-based writing. So go through the program of studies. And now if I said go through the program of studies and just take a look at, so what outcomes, the program of studies is huge. And so that's when we recommend using that writing specific one from Edmonton Public. Then what you want to do is you want to pull out what you would define as must-dos or important items within that curriculum first, and then kind of take a look on how that will connect with the unit that you're teaching and how that's going to connect with the rubric. Now what you want to do is you're going to cross-examine the rubric from the units of studies and what the skills they suggest that are covered within the genre, and take a look at both that and the curriculum, the things that you've pulled out that you feel are important, and see how and if they overlap. Then you're going to look for that overlap. You're going to identify where within the rubric you will assess what outcomes. And so that probably just sounds like an absolute mouthful. So I'm going to show you how I did that. And so I'm going to show you just on my iPad. But what I did is I put in my ugly, hideous picture of what my planning looked like and how my connections worked, because it's not like I said, the hard and fast way to do it. This is literally what my thinking looked like while I was going through this process myself. And so what I thought we would do is I will show you what my thinking looks like in this process. I'm just going to get set up here. So if you just give me 1 minute.
Lauren, maybe I'm trying to answer Paula's question, and I think as you're setting up your iPad, I'm just going to go back and answer her question, because I think it was a good question that many of you may have the same question. So she was asking about using technology or handwriting, and she was suggesting like some of her students might be on IPP, and for them, Google, like they need to use Google Read and Write. So she was saying like, is it an advantage to normalize it, to offer it to our students? Yes, big time, as a UDL. So my initial reply was like, the Teachers College is definitely, and not just them, many research says when we're talking about writing, there's a definite research shows that the process of handwriting, not just talking about the fine motor skills, but what's happening in your brain when you're using that pen, it kind of slows down your writing, your process, that there's an advantage of doing it on paper. However, technology is also, some of our students can't. So, and some students with the higher grades too, the using Google Docs is super important. So one of the comments was making sure that we're keeping that history so the teacher can see all the revision that the student made, and opening it to all students, I think is super important. That it goes back to that universal design for learning, where we're offering those solutions to all. And I'm just thinking on my own boy last week had to do some writing, and the teacher had asked to do it on the computer. And I actually asked him, I said, what do you prefer? Because he had to come up with a story. And for him to help him with his thinking, he did prefer using paper. So I think to me, it's always like anything else, I would offer that strategy to our students and then let them choose what is better for them. Now, some students, I may guide them a bit more if I know as a teacher, knowing those students towards one technology more than paper, but I think overall just offering it to all, there's advantage. Hopefully, Paul, I've answered your questions. Okay, Lauren, I'm good.
Okay. So what I have here is I have the grade 2 writing behaviors for ELA. Now, I'm not gonna go through the entire, I'm not gonna go through every outcome with you, but what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna show you kind of my thought process, and maybe I'm gonna look at some SLOs, more specifically that kind of connect with a narrative unit. So the first one that I'm going to point out to you that I thought had quite a bit of information was the creating original text piece. And so the first thing that stuck out to mind for me was, okay, well, wow, we have a narrative, specifically something that's narrative in here. So create narratives that have beginning, middles, and ends, settings, main characters that perform actions, traditional story beginnings, okay, so something that we could maybe consider, patterns, stock characters, so protagonist, antagonist, and own oral, print, and other media. So for my sake right now, I'm looking at print. Some other things, so looking back at the top, elaborate on the expression of ideas. Descriptive words to elaborate on ideas, create particular effects. Interesting. Okay, so that's something that's really important. Using own and responding to others' ideas. So using, for right now, we're not going to do a response. We're going to talk about our own to create a text. Obviously, is kind of like the big overarching idea. Now, I'm going to go and I'm going to take a look now at the rubric for Writers Workshop. And I'm going to see where I'm going to be able to find these things. And so what I'm going to see out of the gate, we're talking about grade 2 writing right now. And so the writer wrote about one time when he or she did something. Okay, sure. Now, if I read into the lead, the writer thought about how to write a good beginning. Ooh. Chose a way to start his story. He chose the action, talk, or setting that would make a good beginning. So right away, I look and I know that that's connected, because the way that it's connected is, first of all, we're talking about that beginning, middle, and end piece, but we're also talking about creating a particular effect, because an action, talk, or setting that would make a good beginning. So the student right now is talking about that effect piece. So absolutely, this relates to Geo 2.4. Now I can look and see what it said. The writer tried to make a beginning for their story. Okay, sure. But this, I would definitely agree, big check mark, it aligns right away with our curriculum, because we're talking about creating effects and a beginning, middle, and end. Trying to make a beginning, no, that's not in the curriculum. It says that the writer will include a beginning, middle, and end. So I can go, and I can keep going now. So the writer told her story in order by using words such as when. Okay, so that's not really applicable. And then, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to keep going through I could even argue here, the writer wrote about one time when he or she did something, because that's a narrative piece of writing, right? So I can actually argue here that this too, yep, definitely. Now, one time when he or she did something, and here it's just wrote about when the writer did something. I will just take note of that. Maybe I'll star it and I'll come back to see where our curriculum, in my personal opinion, fits here. Okay, so I'll come back to this. Now,
Lauren, I would even say that in your transitions piece, that the use of those transitions is for effect. So it would fit very nicely with your 2.4 as well, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So.
Yep. Absolutely. And so what I'm going to keep going through. So if I look now at something like elaboration, The writer tried to bring his characters to life with details, talk, and actions. I would argue again that that is related to this. Okay. But does it say specifically what these effects are? No. Our SLOs, as you know in our curriculum, are very open-ended. And so we are going to, don't worry, we will talk about that. Again, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of look at what my span looks like. So the writer tried to bring his characters to life. Yeah, I would definitely say that I'm going to connect that geo with that. Now, the writer put the picture from her mind onto the page. She had details, pictures, and words. Now, elaboration, looking at that geo or that SLO specifically, talking about effects to make change in their writing, I think that definitely we would get grade 2 people to write this. I like that. I'm going to keep going. And so I would keep going through this entire piece and going back to the curriculum. So I know that Jody had said absolutely these transitions can create that. There's also a piece, for example, in here. I'm going to just try to find it here quickly. I know it's in here.
Tell us what you're looking for and maybe we can help.
Okay, yeah, so sorry for that transition piece. So it's right here. So looking under 4.1, so we are revising words and sentences to improve sequence.
Yes.
Absolutely, that's huge. That's a huge connection right away
To the
to here.
transition. Yep.
Huge, right? Keywords such as that, the writer told, and then, so the idea now between this is that there's that metacognitive piece that they're thinking of using order words, right? To connect those sentences, to increase. And so I would also look at, so I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna take looking. Look at that, using connecting words to join related ideas in a sentence. Absolutely. Okay, so is this a quick process? No, but we only have one rubric for each genre. And so by the end, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have things that look at what my rubric is going to look like. It's going to look like this. So I'm going to have notes on all of my things. Right? So I'm going to have whatever it is, and I'm going to have all of my outcomes connected. And so when I look at my my finished product of what the rubric looks like in Writer's Workshop, I'll just kind of give you an example of what my finished one when I did grade 2 is. So what I started to do is once I was able to connect the outcomes to an area of the rubric, I boxed where I felt it fit. So like I said to you before, I think that we could definitely find this grade 2 area specifically in our geo. I think that we could definitely find this area specifically in our geo. I think that like transition words here, is it really cut and dry as to it being these words specifically? No. So I might do this with a question mark. And then I'm going to keep moving on. Organization, for example, you know, here's a geo that I found it in. Do I think that it is hard and fast a grade 2? Maybe I looked and I found some, this to me, it was a little bit weird. So if I look at what their organization said, the writer's story had a page for the beginning, a page for the middle, and a page for the end. The next one says the writer wrote a story across 3 or 4 more pages. Okay, well, it doesn't say anything about pages in there, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do maybe like here, I'm going to put a little question mark, and then I'm going to keep moving on. In terms of elaboration, I felt as though we talked about how, you know, it could be this, it could be this, I'm not really sure. The writer's story indicated who was there, what they did, and how the characters felt. Okay, so I'm going to look maybe deeper within my curriculum. I'm going to go back. Now I'm just kind of quickly going here because I want to show you what I did with this one specifically. So 2.4, I think so. Here's what we're looking at. Elaboration. The writer's story indicated who was there, what they did, how the characters felt. They put the picture from their mind onto the page, tried to bring his characters to life. I'm going to go back to my curriculum. I'm going to take a look at this area that I felt it was. Descriptive words, elaborate on ideas, create particular effects. Narratives with settings, main characters that perform actions. I'm going to go back to here. Now I'm going to think how the characters felt. Maybe here. So is this what I would define as actions? I don't know. So I'm going to just definitely star this one off. This, I think it could be here. This could be the span because it's really not specific in this particular outcome. Like what, that's it. That's all we have here. Perform actions. Like what does that mean, right? And so I'm gonna move on. As you know, our curriculum is not cut and dry. There's no be all end all. There's no hard and fast, like this is what grade 2 writers need to do because here's what it looks like. Here's all the specifics. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all of this. And then I'm going to have some areas like of what it can cover and what it can't cover. And then we're going to talk to you about what that next step looks like. Long story short with this whole activity is, does this rubric cover our Alberta curriculum? Cover? No. But do every single one of these connect to AGO, to an SLO? Absolutely 100% yes. I've connected every single aspect of this rubric to our curriculum. Did they all fall here? Maybe not, but that's not the point, right? I'm not looking at, like, I'm not going to grade a rubric based off of kindergarten to grade 3. That's not necessarily how I personally am going to do that. So now,
and I think Lauren, what we want to show is that we started with our curriculum. The rubric is not what we're you started the whole process with our curriculum. Sally, we're going to answer your question in a few minutes.
Yeah, so as a teacher, I'm going to look at what in our curriculum relates to narrative writing and what is really important. And so for me specifically, it was that 1GO, and it talked about beginning, middle, and end, characters, setting, and using elaboration to kind of build on ideas. Because in grade 1, my expectation would be that students are understanding story structure, beginning, middle, and end. Maybe talking about characters, starting to talk about setting, but I want that to start to be developed in grade 2. So now this is when norming meetings become incredibly, incredibly important. I think, Jody, you're going to talk to this slide.
Okay. So essentially what is a norming meeting? It's when we as a team are going to get together and we're going to look at common pieces of student writing. And where are those common pieces coming from? Those are probably going to be coming from our on-demands because everybody would have had the same writing prompt. So we're comparing apples to apples. And why are we doing this? Well, we're starting to try to build that consistency around expectation within your team. And it can also be something that can be done vertically within a school as well, so that we can understand what does it look like for a writer in a narrative at grade 2 versus a writer at grade 3. And so how do we do that? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to pick, you choose a piece of writing that everybody looks at, we take the rubric, and then we need to come to a consensus about what that piece of writing, if that piece of writing meets the criteria that we are referencing it against. And so when I've done norming meetings in the past, I'm going to tell you sometimes that they can become heated. People are very passionate about their opinion. But what's really important about this is that you as a group are building that understanding together. And the reason that, one of the reasons that Rocky View hasn't gone and done this and given people exemplars at these areas is because the value is actually in the meeting, in having the dialogue and the discussion around that writing. that is from our context. And we know that from school to school, the contexts and our students change, and the needs of our students change. And so for us to be able to say, okay, we have 52 schools, you're all going to do this, we feel like there's a greater value in being able to establish these norming meetings at our schools so that we can build our own professional capital and understanding around that and create some consistency.
Something that I would add, Jody, to answer Sandy's and Sally's question in the chat box was that this is when I would do that. Okay, as a team, we're doing this with our great team. If you're losing, like the way you've done it, Jody, like we'd look at one copy together of an on-demand and we would decide using the rubric. And then as a team, we can decide, okay, is this an example of mastery? Is it emerging? Is it limited? That's when I would bring back, the next meeting would be, okay, every teacher's in that grade room, you bring your own copy of the on-demand from your students, and then we're going to make 6 files. So quickly, you're going to read and actually don't read your students. Just put the whole file in the middle of the table, each teacher read 1 copy, and then quickly you have to read based on, after doing that norming meeting, is this copy a mastery? Is this, just to get you as a team to decide that mastery, what does it look like as a team? And that's when you're creating that consistency. Now, as Sandy said, it's trickier when you're the only teacher of that grade level in one school. Definitely, it's really good what Jody said, to do it maybe with the grade above and the grade below, just to create that vertical alignment. However, I hear you, Sandy, when you're the only one at that grade, sometimes like you want someone to bounce ideas. This is why we love the communities of practice. However, we don't have them anymore. But what I have loved through these webinars, through these sessions that we have done, is that online, that's one positive thing of that COVID, is I felt that it has created communities, networking between teachers of other schools. So Sandy, we could definitely get you, well, actually in the chat box, if there's any other teachers who are teaching the same grade as Sandy, please put your name there so she can connect with you. But it's that networking during Rocky View. I'm going to make a note now in my little notebook as something to keep in mind for next year.
And chapter 3 in your writing pathways is dedicated to discussing norming meetings and what those look like, and some helpful hints about how they can be run within your context. So you might want to have check that out as well.
All of these have been covered in that last slide, but some things, some big kind of key rocks here is the process of assessing student writing together is invaluable. It's going to be huge learning for you, but it's also going to create consistency within your team, because I know that every single one of you has looked at a student's report card from the year before and then looking at the work you're seeing and you're like, oh, Hannah, this is not what I have assessed. I had, you know, like, oh, these students are getting mastery. I would be generous to give the student a progressing, right? And so maybe this is a conversation I can have a phone call home about, because we've all come across it where teachers mark how they see it. And we don't always see necessarily the same. And so because Alberta, Canada is huge into teacher autonomy, we need to respect that, but we also need to be willing to have those kind of conversations with each other in terms of what does this look like. So together is how you're going to create the norms. So I'm so sorry to Sally. I know you really wanted us to be able to translate this rubric into our curriculum, into the report cards, but like it's not going to happen. And 2 reasons as to why. So first of all, creating those norms together and connecting as a team is how you're going to do that, right? Because even for us to do it, for example, and to give that to you, we would want to have multiple teachers involved in that process who are masters in that grade, because I am not a master of grade 1 writing. Jody is not a master of grade 5 writing. You know, she's she's a high school teacher. So I wouldn't be comfortable assessing a grade 12 piece of writing like Jody would. And so we would want masters of teachers in their grade to also have this discussion, because what you're going to find is teachers are going to have different opinions on what an emerging looks like and what a mastering looks like. And what the most important thing to consider as well, and why norming meetings are necessary, if possible, but even if you don't have that opportunity to have a reflective process, is those pieces in the curriculum are the expectations at the end of the grade. So when I'm reading through all of those things and I'm looking at all of those narrative pieces of writing, at the end of grade 2, the student will be able to. And so if I'm doing a narrative writing unit in December is my final on-demand piece, and when my unit is over, that narrative piece of writing is going to look different in December than it could possibly look in June. And so I need to also take that into consideration when I look at what the expectations are. And now I don't want to open the can of worms of like, well, an emerging is an emerging no matter what time of year, but these are things that you need to talk about as a team, right? And so the curriculum is the expectations by the end of the year. Depending on when you assess it, it might look different to you, and that's your personal opinion, or it might not. Your expectations are your expectations are your expectations. So that's when you need to go back as a team, and you need to look at the on-demand samples, and you need to decide, no matter when you're doing it, here is what an exemplary piece of writing looks like. I feel like this is a mastery. And then talking about that as a team. And I think that's something that's also really helpful, is having those that you pull and that you keep and that you post. And so when I was a classroom teacher, one thing I would always do is when it was student-led conferences, I would have student samples of writing and then kind of what the span of writing looks like. And so when you have even parents come in, you have that opportunity to show them like, oh, well, I felt like my student's a really good writer. But when they're able to see what a span of writing looks like, when all the criteria is the same, it's also helpful for people like parents, but also for teachers. And I think that entire process is so incredibly important. So we're not here to, so sorry, just one more thing, Jody. Like, we're not here to tell you how to assess, what assessment looks like. But what we're here to tell you is, does the curriculum connect with Writers Workshop? Absolutely. How that turns into RTR, how that turns into grading, to actual physical grades, we're not here to tell you that. That's a process that you need to go through as a staff.
And I do want to go back just for a second, because I forgot to mention it when we were talking about our rubrics. Just like when we were talking about checklists yesterday, when we're looking at a checklist at the beginning of the year, I'm not going to be, and I'm teaching grade 6 or grade 2, for example, I'm not going to be using the grade 2 rubric at the beginning of the year with my students. What I'm going to be using is, I'm going to be using the grade 1 rubric, because I haven't taught them anything yet, right? And so we want to be able to build that. We're not going to probably transition into using grade level rubrics until halfway through our year. And so that's also something to be considerate of when you're working with these tools in your classroom.
Yeah. If this is something that makes you want to vomit and freaks you out, I'm obsessed with our curriculum, and I love doing this type of thing. And so if this is a process that you're not comfortable with, or perhaps even your grade team would want support with, please reach out to us, because this is something that we can absolutely support you in, kind of like thinking aloud again. We can be there to kind of coach you through the initial steps of what this might look like. Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you, in all my years of teaching, the normings that I've been a part of have been my most powerful professional learning. Because there's something to having to look at a piece, identify where you think it sits, and then justify that to your peers, and have a discussion, a professional discussion or dialogue around that. It's just a really powerful piece, because then you start to look at and consider other things that other people are noticing when they're looking at the same particular piece of text.
So finally, and then we're going to kind of open it up for questions, is there's some other resources available. And so I'll speak to the bottom one. And so again, is an American Resource. So what you're going to see is sometimes some things are not necessarily related to us. So an example is in the grade 4 or grade 5, it talks about the American Civil War. Well, in one of the pieces of writing, in the information piece, I believe. And so that's not really applicable to us. And so it's, again, our responsibility to connect it to our curriculum and making it our own. And so one of the examples that we'll be putting in the resource folder is how you can connect the grade 4 units to our Canadian content and what's in our curriculum as one option. And again, when you're starting out with Writers Workshop, these are things that are going to take time to build out and to do. But it's we need to make it our own, right? And so if it's not applicable to us, and if we can't just follow suit, and like we had said from the get-go, this isn't a program where you have to read every word and do this verbatim. This is an outline and a really great structure of a program, but it's our professional responsibility to be responsive to needs and to continue to keep it in line with our curriculum specifically.
So that resource comes from Sir John A. McDougall School in Edmonton, and that's just an example of what as teacher there had started to make those connections with assets or within our own curriculum. Just as people are starting to leave, I just wanted to show as well units of study. Heinemann has been responsive to teachers trying to access texts that have been locked in classrooms. And so what they've done is they've actually, if your text is registered, you can go to under the general information tab at the beginning of it. There have been some units where the lessons, the COIL books, have been shared digitally. That is not something that is common. Usually those are locked down and are only accessible via the actual kit. But under these circumstances, they have made that available. So if you want to have a look for it and you can't find it, then please send us an email and we can certainly walk you through finding that on your resource site. So with that, Lauren, we're close to end of time, but we're just wondering, for those of you that are still with us, what's resonating with you? What's still circulating in your head? What kind of questions do you have for us that we could answer, if any? And so we'll just wait for those. And those of you that have to leave, thank you so much for joining us in these sessions. Hopefully you found them informative and that you've been able to take at least one or two things away from our learning. So we'll just hang out. Thanks everyone. Have a great